My grandfather's farm had been in our family for generations. Rolling fields, a few barns, a pond, and a small orchard. It wasn't much by modern standards, but to us it was everything. Growing up, I spent summers running through the fields, learning the rhythm of farm life, and listening to my grandfather tell stories about the land's history. It was more than property, it was legacy. When my grandfather passed away, the farm came under my father's name, and eventually it was passed down to me. I had plans to modernize parts of it, maybe turn it into a small agritourism venture, but nothing too commercial. The land was large enough to maintain privacy while still being accessible for family and friends. I assumed we had control over it just as my grandfather had. That assumption, I would learn, was my first mistake. The trouble began when I received a letter from the Homeowners Association that had recently taken over management of the rural subdivision near our property. According to them, my grandfather, or rather me, as the current owner, owed them $450,000 in fees, penalties, and assessments. My jaw dropped. $450,000? For what? Our farm was outside the main development area, far from any amenities the HOA claimed to maintain. I knew something wasn't right. I contacted them for clarification. The response was vague and threatening. Pay the full amount immediately or face liens, legal action, and eventual seizure of the property. I tried reasoning with them, citing the fact that much of our land wasn't technically part of the subdivision and that my family had never signed agreements giving them authority over the farm. They ignored every argument. Desperate, I began digging into the records. That's when I discovered the real story, and my blood ran cold. Over the past few years, unbeknownst to my family, the HOA had secretly sold parts of our farm to developers. Not just any developers, they had built a luxury resort right on land that had been our orchard and fields. From the outside, it looked like a thriving tourist attraction. Cabins, a golf course, swimming pools, and even a spa. But legally, it was sitting on our land because the HOA had forged documents and manipulated zoning regulations. The amount they were extorting, $450,000, was actually the assessment for the resort development, as if we were benefiting from amenities we had no control over. In reality, it was a sham to cover their fraudulent profits and to intimidate us into paying quietly. I was livid, but I knew I had to be careful. The moment I made a misstep, they could try to enforce the liens or take further legal action. I hired a specialized attorney who had experience with HOA fraud and land disputes. Together, we started untangling the web of documents, contracts, and deceptive filings the HOA had orchestrated. Every step revealed more audacity. The HOA had falsified signatures, altered deeds, and even bribed local officials to fast-track permits for the resort. Once we had sufficient evidence, we filed a lawsuit. The claim wasn't just about the $450,000. They had to pay restitution for fraud, damages for illegally occupying our land, and punitive damages for the extreme violation of our rights. The case drew attention because it was so outrageous. A family farm seized under false pretenses, transformed into a multimillion-dollar resort, while the owners were threatened into silence. The legal battle was grueling. I spent months going through filings, court dates, and depositions. The HOA tried to counter with more lies, claiming my grandfather had somehow signed over rights decades ago, despite the lack of any legitimate documentation. But we had evidence, letters, farm records, old maps, even testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed the land being developed illegally. Finally, the court ruled in our favor. The HOA was ordered to pay restitution, void all fraudulent sales, and transfer ownership of the resort land back to us. The resort's developers, who had claimed ignorance of the fraud, were given the option to buy the land legitimately or face eviction. My family's farm was finally restored, intact and untainted by the illegal encroachment. The ordeal left scars, both financial and emotional. The stress of seeing a lifetime of family history nearly lost, combined with the betrayal by an organization meant to preserve community standards, was unforgettable. But there was a silver lining. Our family farm survived, and we had exposed one of the most brazen cases of HOA fraud in recent memory. Today, when I walk the fields that were nearly stolen, I feel a renewed sense of guardianship. I've implemented strict legal protections for the farm and have shared our story with other rural landowners to warn them about the dangers of unchecked HOA power. It's absurd, almost surreal, that a farm could be turned into a luxury resort without the owner's knowledge. But it happened, and we made sure justice caught up with those who thought they could profit from our legacy. In the end, the farm is ours again. The resort stands, but under our control, and every guest who enjoys the place now does so knowing it sits on reclaimed land, protected by the diligence of a family who refused to be bullied. The $450,000 demand was just the tip of the iceberg, but it taught me one thing. Never underestimate the lengths people will go to exploit what's rightfully yours, and never underestimate your ability to fight back.